thanks to the work of President Nelson, who believed the spiritual law exists and natural law exists, and because he believes in God and spiritual law, he could figure it out, that God could help him figure out how to operate on the heart. As if Latter-day Saints didn't have enough to deal with the shooting in Michigan and the Charlie Kirk situation and all of that in Utah happening. On Saturday night, we lost our prophet. Russell M. Nielsen died about 10 p.m. from what we understand on Saturday night. So I wanted to get on here and just explain this. There's no true crime element, but this is the faith element of my channel. For those who are unfamiliar, who he was, what he did professionally, spiritually, who's coming next, how succession works in the church, all that kind of thing. Succession. That's something that I think most people probably don't even know. We have the quorum of the 12 apostles, and then we have the first presidency. First presidency is the prophet, and then he picks 2 counselors. Everyone in the first presidency is also ordained an apostle. So there's technically 15 apostles at any given time. So upon the death of the prophet, who we believe holds all of the keys, who has the authority and all of that, the quorum, the apostles as a group, hold them collectively as well. So once the prophet dies, then the keys go back to the quorum as a group. And the 14 still living go back into the order of seniority, which they originally belonged. Because the counselors can be anyone from the quorum, whoever the prophet feels inspired to call. So they are not like the next in line or whatever necessarily. Sometimes they are, but often not. The apostle with the most seniority, not meaning age, but who was ordained farthest away in time, long ago, that he's considered the president of the quorum. Now, if that person is also serving in the first presidency, then he can't act in that capacity because he has other responsibilities. So the president of the quorum will then be the acting president, to be the next person in seniority. And that's the case that we had most recently with President Nelson. And then we had Eyring and Oakes as his counselors. Oakes is the next in line in seniority. But then we have Holland, who is the next after him, then as acting president. However, now the first presidency is dissolved. They go back to the quorum into seniority. And Oakes, Dallin H. Oakes, is now the president of the quorum. So the president of the quorum is the one who has always been the next in line. The quorum will meet, and unless there's something wild that this never happened before that makes them think that no, this is not the person that the Lord has chosen, they will, as a group, then ordain the president of the quorum as the president and prophet. At the next general conference, they have what is called a solemn assembly, and that is when the church as a group and its individual groups, you will have different age groups, and you'll have the women, and you'll have different organizations sustain the leadership, the new prophet in his position, and that kind of ratifies it and makes it official. Generally speaking, it's a month between a death and the ordination, and then the solemn assembly that is broadcast across the planet. You can watch it on TV and online and all kinds of things, radio, whatever. Usually it's months apart, but this coming weekend is general conference. It's always the first weekend of April and October. So it's possible they could push out the solemn assembly out of just respect, because President Nelson's funeral will not be till Tuesday. So they might wait till after the funeral and do the next general conference in April to be the solemn assembly. It used to be out of respect for the dead. They actually would wait a year or two or more before they would officially even ordain the president of the quorum and make him and then ratify it with the solemn assembly. I think with John Taylor, he succeeded Brigham Young. I think it was 2 or 3 years for him. And then eventually they reached the point of there's no need to put it off. Let's just do it and get it done. If he's not even in the ground yet, will they think that's a reason to postpone? Possibly. I don't know. We've never had something happen this close to general conference before. The closest we've had is when we ended up with 2 solemn assemblies in a row. President Howard W. Hunter was put in. He was then ratified in the next general conference, and then he died. And then we ended up with Gordon B. Hinckley after him in the next solemn assembly. So that's how the succession happens. I'm going to point out that because of how that works, once you're an apostle, there's no release date. Your death is what releases you. You can be put on emeritus status, essentially, if you're too sick to function and do work. Otherwise, every one of The first presidency and the 12, they have assignments that are worldwide, and they're traveling and they're serving, and it's an exhausting job. You die, and that's how you're released. Because of that, change happens in the church very, very slowly, and any significant change has to have unanimity among the 15 top leaders. As you can imagine, that's not particularly easy, and that's also a good safeguard, so if we don't end up with changes that happen willy-nilly that need to be walked back too often, although that has happened. But just to put it into perspective as to how slow the things can change, you're probably familiar with the priesthood ban that did not allow Black members to hold the priesthood or have temple blessings prior to 1978. There was talk about lifting that ban as early as World War II, but it didn't happen until 10 years after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, for enough of the leadership to be in that, in the headspace and the spiritual space to say, okay, let's pray about this and see if this is the Lord's will, which, hello, spoiler, yes it was, to lift the ban. Obviously, President Kimball, he took years of his own studying the scriptures to see, is there a scriptural basis for this ban in the first place? And he knew it would be groundbreaking. I personally believe that the civil rights movement paved the way, helped soften people's hearts. But people who say this, the civil rights movement forced the church's hand, again, this was 10 years after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. The pressure was largely off by that point. People thought, well, they're just a racist organization. And so when people's hearts were in a place to handle that change, fortunately, it was finally made. President Nelson was called as an apostle in the 80s. He is the first person of the apostles to serve who was not present when the priesthood ban was lifted. He was not around during that whole revelation period. So we just now have entered the 1980s as far as leadership goes, when they began in the apostolic position. So that gives you an idea of how slow things can go. Even so, we have 2 members of the 12 who have gay family members. Todd Christofferson's brother has been out for decades, and his family embraced him and said, you are part of our family no matter what, which was monumental. This is the 60s or the 70s. That was not normal back then. And then Garrett Gong, whose son is openly gay and has left the church, but we have people who understand these issues more than ever before in these positions. In addition, I will say that under President Nelson, we have had more change for good regarding marginalized people and women in particular in the church. There has been so much positive change in that direction under his leadership. So my fellow Latter-day Saints, anyone who might be struggling with certain things, and I'm not going to go into details, obviously, but things that, anything that ever gave me pause or was like a or maybe it bothered me that might have been in the temple as a woman is gone. Thanks, and I believe a lot of that is thanks to his leadership, and specifically to his wife, Wendy. Let me explain on that one. His first wife, Dancel, we can credit her with a lot. That she was one of those who helped push him into keep studying surgery. He was a heart surgeon. In fact, that's another, well, let's take a quick tangent there quickly. President Nelson was a surgeon and was part of the team that helped develop the heart-lung machine. When he began medical school, it was believed that you don't touch the heart ever, because then you'll kill the person. You cannot touch the heart. And he did not believe that was true. He thought that there's got to be a way. And he's spoken about this, that he believed that natural and spiritual laws work together, that there are spiritual laws and natural laws. And if he could figure out the natural laws that applied to the heart, he could figure out how to operate on it. And he tried and he failed. And there was one time, after one particular failure, it was a child who died. And he came home and he wept. And he says, I can't keep doing this. And his wife, Dancel, told him, you must, because someone needs to figure this out, because someday we can save children's lives. And you need to get out, cry if you need to, but you need to get back in that operating room and keep trying. So we can thank her for a lot of that. They had a whole slew of children. But after Dancel died, he then married Wendy Watson Nelson, who was a nurse. She was a family therapist, and she was a professor. She was also a single woman who had never been married and never had children. She had traveled the world in her career. And I believe that President Nelson Well, we know he listened to women. He listened to his wife Dancel, he listened to Wendy. And suddenly, when he had Wendy as a wife, he was hearing things from her life perspective that probably had never occurred to him before. That, oh my goodness, this is what it's like. Oh, I never thought of that. And we believe that revelation comes when you ask the question. Like, heck, go back to Joseph Smith. That's how the whole church started, was with a question. Most of the Doctrine and Covenants is question, here's an answer. So I personally believe that a lot of the issues we see in the world today, anything that conflicts with what we might think is wrong as far as church doctrine and marginalized groups or whatever, we will get revelation on those things when we have leadership in place that is asking those questions. And I believe President Nelson is an example of that. That he listened to Wendy and went, literally, that never occurred to me before. I'm going to ask the question. So we asked the question and got answers and made some changes and more changes and more changes. I believe as leadership changes and grows and we have new perspectives and new ideas and new insights, we get new questions being asked, and therefore new doctrines, new revelation, new policies. On a somewhat personal note, about 2 years ago, we learned that my then unborn grandson was going to have a serious heart defect and would need heart surgery shortly after birth. We didn't know how serious it was at the time, and we wouldn't until he was born. It was serious. It was very, very serious, to the point that if he had been born 15 years earlier, he would not have had the slightest chance of survival. Instead, they had the most experienced surgeon west of the Mississippi, and he had been doing the surgery for 12 years. And it went incredibly well, and he's doing fabulously. But when my daughter dropped off her older child for us to babysit that the night before the surgery, so they could be at the hospital with their little baby boy, she was white as a sheet because they had just signed all the scary paperwork. So the next day, she was, keeping the family updated via text. And when I got the text saying that they were about to put my 11-day-old grandson onto the heart and lung machine, I just about fell to my knees. I also said thank you, President Nelson, for helping to develop technology that will hopefully save my grandson. He is almost 2 years old, thanks to the work of President Nelson, who believed the spiritual law exists and natural law exists, and because he believes in God and spiritual law, that he could figure it out, that God could help him figure out how to operate on the heart. He was a world-renowned heart surgeon as a result of all of that. Okay. Who is going to succeed him? Dallin H. Oaks. People see Dallin H. Oaks and they cringe because he tends to be known as a very strict guy. He's bald and he looks very intense. He is a trained lawyer. He has argued cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. I believe he was on the Utah Supreme Court at one point. He was a highly respected lawyer. When he gives his general conference talks, he sounds like a lawyer. He doesn't sound exactly like a cuddly, loving person. And sometimes he gets kind of in your face with some doctrines and beliefs, and sometimes it has come across as hurtful and unkind. And so I did have, when I thought, oh, he's after Nelson, that's thinking that would be a problem. However, I no longer think that, for a couple of reasons. The last couple of general conferences when he has given his talks, there has been a softening. I think he is starting to understand what ministry means for him in a different kind of way. That he needs to be a loving, warm place and a representative of Christ in that way. His talks have been much more loving and caring. There's that. And then also on the other side, one is his more recent talks. It seemed kind of out of the blue, and now I'm thinking, no, it didn't. It seems very timely and important. Keeping in mind, general conferences broadcast to the planet, right? Yeah, this talk was about the importance of the U.S. Constitution. We don't follow a king or a man, we follow the law. And he was emphasizing how important that is. So I currently believe that he is going to be put into place when he is, because the Constitution is literally at risk, and people do not recognize the danger we are in, that we are on the cusp of losing our country because people are abandoning due process, free speech, the right to worship as you wish. So perhaps he is going to be put into place at a time when the US and the planet needs the US to keep surviving, the Constitution to survive. We'll see. I may be wrong. But I suspect we will see a softer Oaks. I do know that when he's spoken in smaller organizations or smaller groups, not over a general conference, that he's freaking hilarious. He's really funny, but you won't see the funny side in general conference. I had his son as a professor in college, and he's my favorite professor to this day. Learned so much from him. He's also hilarious. Absolutely adored his son. Dr. Oaks, Dallin Jr. Good dude. That's how the succession happens. That's who these men are. It's sure been a week, hasn't it? Been a few days. It's been a lot. So that's how it works out. If you have questions, let me know. If we have enough questions, I might do a live at some point to address some of those. We shall see. A little bit different episode than you're used to, and a lot more tears. But some topics that are dear to my heart, and I wanted to talk about. So, again, President Nelson's funeral will be this coming Tuesday after General Conference, which is Saturday and Sunday. So if you're interested in General Conference, you can tune in. It's not going to be hard to find. You can find it all over the place, but it'll be interesting to see. Will it be a solemn assembly, or will they push that off? I'm going to guess it'll be a solemn assembly on Saturday morning. So if you're interested, Saturday, the sessions are always 10 a.m. to noon. This is Utah time. 10 a.m. to noon with a 2-hour break, and then it'll be 2 to 4, and then the evening session will be 6 o'clock. It doesn't usually go to 8. And then Sunday there'll be 2 sessions, the 10 a.m. and the 2 p.m. And the Tabernacle Choir usually sings on Saturday morning, and then usually Sunday morning as well. So if you want to listen to those sessions in particular, you can. Take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, give them a hug.